the afternoon stretch. We've got our two rosters to pass around. So the one with the state emblem up in the upper left corner. And you're going to put your certificate number if you remember that. Otherwise, don't guess at it. Signature, print your name clearly, the last 4 digits of your social security number and your employer, for those of us who are still employed, and some retired.
You could put cell phone there.
And then on the MRWA roster, your printed name, your email address, your mobile phone number, your mailing address, because they still will print out a hard copy certificate of completion for today's class, and they can send that to your home if you like. And your mobile carrier, again, whichever system you're with. And so if you would put your information on both sets. This one is, I've got a couple of pages there because we only have 7 lines on the page, so we'll need more. I'll just pass that around and we'll get launched into our next segment, which is public notification. Talk some about public notification. So of course the intent is to simply make sure our customers are informed of news that affects them, relevant news. Triggers for notification is when we exceed an MCL, maximum contaminant level, in any substance in drinking water, or a treatment technique, or an action level. Action level like lead, copper rule. Treatment technique we're going to be talking some about a little more. Treatment technique like the total organic carbon removal percentages requirement, and we'll talk about other rules that have treatment technique with them. Waterborne disease outbreak, or the potential for that. We've got some kind of substance in water potentially that could affect people's health. Monitoring violation would be another one, and variance or exemption from regulation. Sometimes natural resources weighs in on our particular circumstances and says maybe we can have a little higher limit in our water system due to extenuating circumstances. So 3 tiers for notification. First, there's tier 1. The smaller the number, the more severe or the more threatening or immediate the threat is. So that is an acute health risk. Acute is a way of saying immediate onset of symptoms after maybe a single dose of a potential contaminant or pathogen in water. Immediate would be within minutes, within hours, or within a day or 2. That's immediate sickness. We have tier 2, which is representing a health risk, but non-acute, so more like chronic. Lots of exposure over a long period of time of water with elevated levels of a substance that is regulated that could cause increased chance of getting sick down the road. So that would be a tier 2. And tier 3, typically monitoring and reporting violations. Response time for tier 1 notification. What is the response time for tier 1? 24 hours. Good. 24 hours. It is. That's an immediate health risk to the public, or represents that potential. So we want to get the word out as quickly as possible. So electronic broadcast media, I typically try to say that phrasing nowadays. They say electronic media, electronic broadcast media, to represent what I'm going to say the old-fashioned electronic media, television and radio, as opposed to social media like Facebook and Twitter and those kinds of things, Instagram and all that. Conspicuous public posting, door-to-door delivery method might be acceptable in a small system. Tier 1 situations, MCL violations. Can you think of anything that's off the top of your head that's a Tier 1 violation would represent an immediate health risk to the public? Say that again. Okay, in the total coliform rule, E. coli, we had E. coli positive result, that would be. What about, can you think of something that would affect infants, small children? Nitrates, right. Nitrates and nitrites in water, what's the concern about that?
They call it blue syndrome.
Good, blue baby syndrome, because baby literally suffocates to death because it robs them of oxygen in their bloodstream, right? Blue baby syndrome. So nitrates and nitrites at a higher level. Also, there's chlorine dioxide. The maximum residual disinfectant level for chlorine dioxide is 0.8. Exceeding that limit is considered an acute violation, immediate threat to the public. If your turbidity is in excess of 5.0 NTUs, that's considered immediate health risk. Just a waterborne disease of any sort from any type of pathogen or disease-causing microorganism would be. If you had a failure of a significant component in your treatment process, that could be an acute violation, as in a risk to your public's health. And so those are reasons enough to get the word out as quickly as you can. For non-community water systems, some systems can be allowed a elevated level for nitrates in their water, because if people aren't living there, they're not getting regular exposure to this substance. So response time for Tier 2 notifications is 30 days. 30 days. And for those, we say direct delivery method for getting the word to the customer. In a typical municipality or water district, it sends out a monthly bill. That's a real easy, handy, automatically going to be sending you a bill anyway method for getting word out, having a little note on the water bill itself about that violation. If not a water bill, then a letter or a newsletter, and it could be public posting in a non-community water setting as well. Ways to get the word out. Hand delivery there. Situations categorized as Tier 2 violations are MCLs that don't represent an immediate health risk, like the one for total trihalomethanes, haloacidic acids. Years and years and years of drinking water with elevated levels of total trihalomethanes could cause an increased chance of getting cancer. Okay, nobody's going to get sick overnight. You got a little more time to get the word out. Maximum residual disinfectant levels for chlorine and chloramine. Treatment technique violations, like didn't get enough removal of my organic carbon, total organic carbon from my source water. Monitoring and reporting violations. Monitoring and reporting typically are Tier 3, but if you have kind of repeat offenses, DNR can bump them up to be a Tier 2, make them a little more of a significant issue by virtue of your chronic failure to get reporting or monitoring. Failure to comply, and that would be if you have a variance or an exemption, DNR grants you certain provisions that have a different requirement than most systems, then there might be stipulation that you are doing something additionally to qualify, and you've got to comply with that. Failure to collect at least 3 source water samples for cryptosporidium for our long-term 2 enhanced surface water treatment rule would be a Tier 2 violation. Failure to take corrective action following either, in the groundwater rule, a notice of E. coli positive sample results from your source water or significant deficiency. I haven't really gone into the groundwater rule yet. I have a separate module about that. We will discuss that soon. Public notification period for Tier 3 violations. We talked about that earlier, consumer confidence report, so we got to get that word out to customers by July 1st. So Tier 3 violations, typically monitoring, reporting. Failed to take all of my back T samples required this month. If you get busy or something and forgot to do it, didn't get around to it, that would be a monitoring violation. Or you fail to send a report in required by the state, that would be a reporting violation. Special public notices. For instance, the secondary MCL for fluoride is 2.0, and even exceeding that is something you are supposed to report in your consumer confidence report. So other timetables, you repeat your public notification every 3 months if the violation continues. All information must be up to date and current, and you want to send a copy of your public notification to DNR, and you're supposed to do that within 10 days of posting it to your public. So they've got a copy on file of what you've provided your customers. And maintain all public notification records for a period of 3 years. There are 10 required items of a public notification. Describe the violation or the situation. It might not be a violation, it might be a situation. Let's say we had a water main break and low pressure. Well, that's not a violation, just a circumstance that occurred, but we're letting the public know about it. When did it occur? Potential health effects, and the Chapter 8 of the Drinking Water Regulations actually has the prescribed language you use for any kind of substance in water that could affect public health. Population at risk. The population usually is, as someone said earlier, the very young, very old, infants, young children who don't have a fully developed immune system yet, very old. Anybody who's had an organ transplant would be more susceptible to being affected by a pathogen in water. Anybody who's on chemotherapy or radiation therapy would be more susceptible. So those are populations that are really independent from the very young and very old. Anybody at any age could be affected by some of those conditions. Alternate water supplies necessary. Are they necessary? Should public drink bottled water or boil their water, or are we interconnected with another water system? Actions consumers should take, and usually that would be if you experience specific symptoms, usually nausea, diarrhea, or vomiting, anything like that, you would say, go to your public health department and get checked out. Corrective measures the system's taking, expected compliance time frame, we expect to be back with full pressure and everything working fine in a couple of days or whatever. Name, telephone number, and business address for more information, so they've got somebody to contact and ask. And then the most another addition to that is this standard distribution language, kind of share the news. You might have a neighbor who's been away for vacation or a business trip. You might have a neighbor or a family member who's been in the hospital, not tuning in to news and not maybe hearing public notifications. So kind of spread the news so that others have the benefit of hearing. And that's really all on public notification. Has anybody had any trouble with public notifications, getting the word out to the public, or what do I need to do? Or any questions about it? All right, let me get this. And revised total COLA form. Getting right into that. Revised total COLA form rule. This rule's been around now, let's see, April 1st of 2016, so this is 2018. So 25 months. This is May 1st, right? 25 months exactly today. This rule's been in effect. The revised total COLA form rule, we probably are pretty familiar with it now that it's been around for a little while, 2 years, but there might be some things that we still haven't encountered. So what I'd like us to do now, this is for the MRWA Cups. We're going to play another round, another game. The same groups you had before, you're all kind of seated together anyway, but you might still, if you need to get a little closer so that you can confer with one another. What we're going to do is the team one was in the lead this morning, so team one will lead us off today as controlling the game board. It's going to be somewhat like Jeopardy, as in we're going to have points, and we're going to just see who's got the most points at the end. Nothing intended to embarrass anybody or whatever. We're just going to try to have a little fun with this revised total COLA form rule. So I'll ask a question. The team that controls the board, I've got a point spread of 1 through 6 in several categories. So you can choose your category, and you can choose however many points you want. I'll put that game board up here in just a moment, but let me get through these rules. If your team that chose the points gets it right, you get that many points. If you get it wrong, you lose that many points. Now, I am going to ask in this small group, or I might ask Jim to be a scorekeeper, Jim, if you wouldn't mind, just because somebody needs to do the math, adding and subtracting for teams. If you've got, do you have some scrap paper or something where you could just team 1, 2, and 3 to keep track of it, because we'll want to know in the end who wins. If the team that was controlling the board gets it wrong, then if whoever of the other teams, if you raise your hand first, you get a shot at it. If you get it right, you get the points. If you get it wrong, you also lose those points. Okay, so I'm going to try to mirror to the extent I know, like a Jeopardy game, but with fewer points. If both teams are wrong, I'll simply give the answer so we just don't keep everybody guessing at that. So we're going to go to that. So let me get out of this and go to the game board thing and bring that up. So here we are. We have these categories: sampling, treatment techniques, violations, public notifications, and seasonal systems. These are about the revised total COLA form rule. These questions all are about this rule. So unlike this morning's game, when we're trying to figure out which rule a phrase was, I'm going to be giving questions that fall under these different categories. So team one, if you want to huddle together or whatever, or confer, and we're going to try to make this not take too painfully long. So what I'm going to say is, let's play, as in let's have fun. Let's don't sweat over worrying about whether we're accurate, right or wrong. We'll just add and subtract points rapidly, right?
Yes.
So, team one.
Public notifications.
Okay, public notifications, and I'm going to turn to section that has information there, and your question. So, how many points do you want there?
Let's go for 3 points.
3. Okay, so what I'm going to end up doing to get through each of these, I'm going to delete that number right there each time so that we know we're shooting for 3, and we also know that that points have been already used up. So public notification, here's your question. What public notification is required when a system has 2 or more coliform positive samples in the same month?
We're gonna say tier 2.
Okay, no? Anybody?
Tier 1.
No? Kind of like a trick question. None.
None. Oh, God.
There is no public notification requirement when you have 2 or more coliform positive samples in the same month anymore. That's part of the change of the revised code. You're absolutely right about the coliform rule, but now this replaces that. The revised code changes things. So we're going to see some changes.
So that's no points.
It's a
Or did they get a -3?
-3, -3.
Talk about being a whole star.
Tom, did we get to keep our points from this morning's round?
If you did, you'd be at 0 right now, which is actually better than -3, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so because you didn't get it right, you don't control the board anymore. Normally, I would say it'll fall to the next team, but the next team got it wrong, so I'm going to just jump to the neutral team, I guess. Sampling, okay. So sampling, and how many points do you want to go with? 3? Okay. We'll get rid of that 3 there. Sampling. Okay, when a system collects only 1 routine sample, how many repeat samples must it collect at minimum if this system, if the sample, is coliform positive?
2. 2.
Okay, 2. No. I saw your hand. No, unfortunately, no. It is at minimum 3.
Oh,
3 repeats.
So did they both get a -3?
yeah, we're a -3.
-3.
At the site that was bad, it was flat. Where would the third one be? Or just 3 for repeat?
That's an excellent question, and I'm not going to answer it. But if you still have that question when we're finished with this module, let me know, because we will cover it in the module. This game happens before the module. This is kind of like to test your knowledge before I kind of give you all the answers. Yes?
Did they change that? Because that time I had to take 5.
It used to be 5.
Yeah, it used to be
I always
5.
take 5.
Repeats?
Repeat
Yeah.
samples.
When you had, if you had a bad one, you had to take 5 more.
Yeah, that's different. Different from that.
Well, I was going to say, Wendy, if they changed it in the last couple of years, I don't know. So that's, well,
And there might be a little confusion here because I haven't talked about all the details on this rule yet. So I'm kind of hesitating to dive into that or to answer your question because I'm kind
It might
of giving
be.
away answers
Yeah.
that I haven't asked you, to questions I haven't asked you.
You know the answer then.
Yeah, he knows that.
Yeah,
You know, okay.
I know the answer. It's just I don't want to.
I
I don't want to spill the beans yet.
It wasn't in plan.
So I'm going to say we had 2 there that were wrong. We're going to go to team 2 now for your choice of which category you want.
Treatment techniques, 4.
Oh, 4, okay, so.
3 ain't been lucky, so
Treatment techniques. What treatment technique is triggered when a system has 2 coliform positive samples in the same month, 2 or more? Anything come to mind? What, yes? What, just forfeit your 4 points?
Does that have anything to do with technique?
Is that
Treatment technique. Yeah, it's kind of a technique.
What'd you say, Steve?
I didn't hear you.
Disinfection. Disinfection.
No. Did you have your hand up? Oh. It's, okay, so if nobody else is gambling, that's a -4. And I'm gonna just tell you that one because nobody else is risking it. It's a level 1 assessment. Level 1 assessment. Now again, like this morning, this is out of context and you're trying to piece together this stuff. When we go into the details, it'll be like, oh yeah, I know all that stuff, but I'm disjointedly taking all these things out of context. So that makes it hard. Okay, I'm gonna say team 1 now. Your turn to control the board again.
Okay. Take one you want. Let's do sampling for. Okay. Oh. Sampling for 2.
Okay. Sampling. If a system that collects fewer than 5 routine samples in a month, how many routine samples must the system collect the month following a coliform positive result? No.
5.
No, sorry. Revised total coliform. That R stands for revised. So things have changed. The same number as they collected this month. Their usual number. No, I just said any system that collects fewer than 5 and it gets coliform positive results. The old rule said, well, if you were fewer than 5, you had to take 5 routines next month. And I heard you even discussing that. And I was thinking, no, that's the old rule. The new rule says you don't have to do that anymore. Just take however many you normally take next month. So that's what that's getting at. That's the difference. That's one of those differences. The old rule and the new rule.
When in doubt, verify with DNR.
Yeah, good point. Which could be the summation of this entire class. I mean, when in doubt. Okay, so I'm going to say we didn't have any other second guesser. Oh, we did. Who had the second guess on that? Okay, so I think it's going to be your turn to control.
Sampling 6.
Sampling for 6. All right. There's a brave soul in our company here. Wait a minute, I must have made it. All right, that was sampling. So this would be our third down. DNR wants routine samples collected at blank areas within the distribution system so that they are not all clustered together. What's the blank in that question?
Would you repeat that again?
Yeah,
Yes, sir. DNR wants routine samples collected at blank areas within the distribution system so they're not all clustered together.
Up and down.
Routine samples.
You Googling the answer?
you Google it.
Well,
Different areas.
You would,
Separate.
I'm going to accept that because representative areas. In other words, like you're saying, separate, more spread out.
yeah, but wouldn't that be up, down, up, down,
Up
up?
and down.
I think you're thinking of repeats or up and down.
Well, now, all I know is when we laid our collection points out, they said they would like to have them up, down, and across.
Okay, I can see your context there as you explain it to me. But yeah, normally they don't reference it that way. They say representative of water where, yeah.
If it was on operator certification test, it would be the representative would be the right answer.
Representative would be the word they'd be using, yeah. It would be. Okay, so we're gonna throw that to you again to control it.
Public notifications for 4.
Public notifications for 4. And that means these guys took your 6 points and ran with
Yeah,
it. So
they're good down there.
they benefited from that.
They may over that.
Public notification, all right, this is our first one on this one, isn't it? Yeah, no second question on this one. What means of delivery would a system's public notification take? In other words, how would you get the word out to your customers if the system has an E. coli MCL violation? Okay, good. The media, the electronic media, basically, the electronic broadcast media, I'm going to try to say. Okay, so that's 4 points for Team 2, and they're still controlling the board. Team 2, you're on a roll.
Public notifications for 2.
Okay, notifications. Within what time frame must the system notify customers of a treatment technique violation?
1 year.
No,
30 days?
30 days. Well, look at that. You just took their points down.
I had to try to get some of them back. I like this game. This really helps you learn.
There you go. Or it makes you more confused. I'm not sure which. I haven't done this class enough to know.
It would help if we had a copy of that revised.
Maybe I should have done this after I went through the segment, right? See how well you were paying attention. This. Okay, so tell me what your category is and what points you want.
I guess, what's that, no, what about sampling for one?
Sampling for one. You just answered. Now you're going back to. And all right, system has 2 of its repeat sample sites. System has 2 of its repeat sample sites, 8 to 10 service connections downstream of its routine sample site. So 2 repeat sample sites are 8 to 10 service connections downstream from its routine sample site. What, if anything, is wrong with that?
You said 8 to 10 downstream? They should be upstream, downstream, sideways. I don't know, no, I didn't know that one.
Well, what you're saying is accurate. They should be upstream and downstream. I'm not sure about sideways, but that's a new one for me. But
And sometimes water flows more than one direction.
that's right. Yes. So upstream, downstream, but that's not really the gist of the question. The question says, okay, but here's my routine sample site. I had a coliform positive result. Now I go, let's say 10 service connections
Away from that one.
downstream from that.
Mhm.
Is that okay?
I said no. I don't know. We just lose the point.
I would say no.
I would say no. I would say,
Okay, so what is wrong with it? You're saying, is it wrong? You're saying, no, it isn't wrong?
I'm saying, yes, it is wrong. That then you should maybe go down 1 or 2 sampling sites and take another one. I don't know.
Okay,
Anybody else?
I hear some, that
Yeah,
goes
go
back
ahead.
to
Go ahead.
the old rule. Yes.
You want to be closer to your sample instead of 8 to 10 services away, you want to be closer upstream and downstream.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, I get it. He's
But no. Okay, but no. Sorry. The new regulation no longer requires you to be in, the number was 5, within 5 service connections. The new regulation no longer requires you to be within 5 service connections. You should be somewhere in the vicinity. I mean, you don't want to have one on the south side of town, a coliform positive, and go to the north side of town and take your reading. You know, you want to be somewhere in the neighborhood, but
So we'll just forget everything we know.
Wait for the points on that.
-1.
What's
Do
that?
they both get a -1 or what?
We do, I do.
Yeah, they both do 2 and 3. So team 1, I think we're going to throw it to you now.
Yeah.
Say it again.
What's the points?
Lots of minuses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Who's
yeah.
closest to
Or how are we
zero?
doing?
Well, it's not us.
Well, I'd say Team 2's probably ahead.
Yeah. We're probably right. Well,
You might as well go for a 6.
Systems for 6.
All right.
man.
Brave souls. Nobody has even taken this category before. All right. So let's see what this kind of question is. Name one possible requirement for a seasonal system prior to its seasonal operation.
That's a good question.
Can you read that one more time?
Yeah.
Sure. Name one possible requirement for a seasonal system prior to its seasonal operation, prior to when it opens for the season.
Needs to be sampling.
That would be one possibility, so that is correct. Look at that.
Man,
They
look at
grab
that,
6
man.
points. Collect a back T sample, or maybe flush its distribution system, or maybe disinfect, shock its system, depending on what they think might be
He's right.
problematic. That's good. So, boy, you did well on that. So now you control the board still.
Could go for 6 again.
Let's go seasonal for 5.
Seasonal for 5, okay? It was good one time. Let's see how it works this time.
You're hoping he told the answer just now.
Okay, what violation occurs, if any, if a seasonal system fails to conduct startup procedures as required by DNR? No? What would we call, it is a violation, what would we call
Tier
it?
2 for
Tier
not
three.
reporting or monitoring.
Okay, I'm gonna accept that.
Yeah.
Treatment technique violation, which is a tier 2 level violation. So you're calling it by the level it falls under, as opposed to the name, I'm gonna call it good. So they get the -6 plus 6,
Five.
and you control the board.
5.
5.
Oh, 5,
Yeah.
excuse me, sorry.
Try violations for 3.
Violations for 3.
How do we know about
Is that the first time violations was chosen? No, second, it's the second time, isn't it? Yeah. I only have one number disappear.
One off there.
I thought we did too. Does anybody remember what that was? What number that was?
Maybe we'll get it this time.
I think first 3 was.
I don't think it's gonna matter, we ain't gonna die.
Well, I do remember asking that first question. So the next one is, what violation occurs when a system has one E. coli positive routine sample and one coliform positive repeat sample? What violation?
You want the name of the violation or what?
Yes, name of the violation would be great.
Total goal phone rule.
Well, that's the rule it falls under. So what is the, I'll give you a chance to regroup on that one, because that's the rule it falls under, but not the name of the violation. Mike,
It's tier 1. That's what I was gonna say, tier 1.
they did sneak into tier 1, didn't they? Okay, so that's the category, or the, yes, tier 1, it's an E. coli MCL violation, E. coli MCL violation. So tier 1, I deleted number 1 under violations, not remembering which number we did.
How'd your points go that time? I lost track.
That was 3, and that was to, positive to number 2 team.
Okay.
And then number 2, because you got that right, you control the board.
Yeah, that's all. I
Uh,
better leave that then on one
every other day. Treatment techniques for 2.
All right. Treatment techniques. Who may perform a level 1 assessment?
Engineer.
Well, I shouldn't have worded it may, because I guess anybody under the sun may. I'm gonna say no, sorry. Who's next? Who wants to try? Nobody? Nobody daring about it? The system representative, the water operator. Doesn't have to, in other words, doesn't have to be an engineer. Because we kind of think of things that do have to have an engineer, like the doggone construction permit stuff.
The operator took it, so the operator should complete the assessment.
Operator should
They're
complete
the
it.
only one that knows the conditions at the time.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's see. Didn't have anybody else in play, so we'll go back to team 1 to take charge of the board.
Let's go with violations for 4.
I tried to steer them down here. Okay. Violations for 4. Okay, yep, I want to make sure I'm on the right one. What tier level violation occurs if a system fails to collect all of its repeat samples following an E. coli positive routine sample? What tier level?
Tier 1.
Tier 1 is correct. Very good. Okay, violations for 5. What violation occurs if a system fails to conduct a level 1 assessment?
Tier 2?
Okay, tier 2 is category, so we're going to give it to you, and the actual term for it is treatment technique violation. Treatment technique, because there's level 1 and level 1 is a treatment technique violation. Okay, you still control the board.
Let's just stay with violations and we'll go with 2.
Okay, violations. What violation occurs if a system fails to collect any of its routine samples?
Tier 3.
It would be tier 3, and it would be monitoring violation. Okay, we'll accept that.
It's just no violations for 6. Finish with that.
Okay. Normally, when a team is doing so well, you would say, good job, but these guys are good at knowing violations. I'm not so sure if that reflects favorably on this team or not, that's for sure. What violation occurs if a system fails to submit a completed level 1 assessment? Fails to submit a completed level 1 assessment.
Say tier 2.
No? Any takers? No? Level 3. It's a reporting violation. It's still a tier 3 violation. And wouldn't you know that was the 6-pointer, right? No. Okay, so I think we'll just bump it to team 2. Next one in line there.
Treatment techniques for 3.
All right. Treatment techniques. When I do get to this subject on my slides, you're going to say, well, we've heard that before. It's all repeat. And this would be under treatment techniques, the third question 3. In what time frame must a level 1 assessment be completed? Did I ask that one already? Okay. In what time frame must a level 1 assessment be completed?
24 hours.
No? Any other takers? No? No other takers?
Is it 30 days?
30 days. It's 30 days. Okay, so team 1 gets the points and they get to choose their category.
Public notifications for 5.
All right, public notifications. A system that has a reporting violation must inform its customers how?
By mail, letter.
No. Anybody else?
Consumer confidence report.
Consumer confidence report. Consumer confidence report. So team 2.
You don't need to move it.
Seasonal 3-pointer.
Seasonal 3, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking this year, but.
That we're taking a nap.
Actually, you should do some.
Oh, okay, let me just find where I was. What violation occurs, if any, if a seasonal system fails to provide documentation of its startup procedures to DNR.
Repeat it one more time.
What violation occurs, if any, if a seasonal system fails to provide documentation of its startup procedures to DNR?
No violation.
No? Anybody? It's a Tier 3 reporting violation. Failure to report. Okay, so I'm going to say Team 3 now. Control that board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same for fire.
Sampling for 5. All right. A system serving 1,000 customers or fewer may collect its upstream repeat sample where? Typically with DNR's permission, where?
Before this point,
At the what?
before this point,
No.
Anywhere.
Would it be at the source?
Yes, it's at the source, but now he's already answered the second, but it's at the well prior to any chemical injection upstream. For those really small systems, they may do so. All right, so we didn't
Who
have
got
any.
that? Did anybody get that?
They did, I think.
No, Bonnie got it. We had a third guess, but at that point, it's too late. So team 1?
Choice? Seasonal systems for 2.
All right. Seasonal systems. In what time frame must a seasonal system inform its customers of a treatment technique violation?
Is it gonna be 10 days? Or
No, it's not 10 days.
it's seasonal, I didn't know if it'd be that or 30 days.
Anybody? Nobody's chomping at the bit to do it?
Not at all.
30 days.
30
And
days. Well,
you had that as one of your
I was
second
thinking
of
it'd be seasonal, that 30 days may be too long.
Oh, yeah, I could see where that would be a possible consideration, but no, 30 days don't apply for them. Team 2, I'm gonna let you take that board this time.
Seasonal 4.
Seasonal for 4, getting down there. All right. By what means would a seasonal system likely inform its customers of a treatment technique violation?
Posting CCR,
Posting the CCR?
post on like a board, bulletin boards and like a.
Okay, so public posting of its violation, treatment technique violation? Want to clarify that a little bit?
Say it again.
Okay, by what means would a seasonal system likely inform its customers of a treatment technique violation?
I don't understand what you're asking for that.
Well, here, we're splitting hairs.
No.
Public posting
Yeah.
is right, but you had to give me that doggone phrase, consumer confidence report, which isn't for a treatment, that would be a treatment technique violation, which is a tier 2, which doesn't go in a consumer confidence report. I'm gonna call it right, because you got the gist of how would you get it to them?
Right.
You'd publicly post. You were just answering something else that I wasn't asking, so I'm gonna say, I'll ignore that part. Public posting. So, okay, you control the board again.
Public notification 6.
Public notification 6. Oh, hey, we still have a couple of 6s out there, no? So, and if a system fails to collect all required repeat samples following an E. coli public notification, is that the one we're doing? Yeah. Following an E. coli routine sample, how soon must it inform its customers?
24 hours.
What, 24?
24 hours.
Right, 24 hours, good. That was a big one too, 6 pointer. So,
Public notification.
okay, we'll just plink off this category altogether. How soon must the system notify its customers if it fails to correct any significant deficiency identified by DNR within the permitted time?
One more time?
How soon do you have to tell your customers if you fail to correct a significant deficiency in our sites?
Within a year.
No,
30 days?
30 days. All right, 30 days, good.
Yeah, I did see that.
So your team gets to choose. Treatment technique for 6?
Somebody else pick. But don't fix it.
Sampling for 4. Get off the.
Sampling for 4, picking that category is our last one there. Let's see here. Sampling for 4. And that question is, how many routine sample locations should a system have at minimum? How many, at minimum, how many routine sampling sites should a system have?
3.
Absolute minimum. No.
It's representative
Right.
of the system itself. I mean, there's not set numbers. Just-
Well, as a minimum, though, I mean, yes, you're right, bigger populations have to have quite a few sampling sites. What would be the minimum required?
5.
5. Okay, so team 1 gets at 5 minimum. Even if you're really small, they typically say 5. Okay, which category? I think we only have 2 left.
Treatment techniques for 5.
Treatment technique for 5, all right. Treatment technique for 5. And then we still have a few of these left. What might trigger a level 2 assessment? What, under this rule, if I told Oklahoma rule, what would trigger a level 2 assessment?
Failed equipment.
No? Anybody? Again, tough to pull this out of thin air. So an E. coli positive, basically you get confirmed E. coli. So E. coli MCL violation. Or 2 level 1 assessments within a rolling 12-month period that are unresolved would do that. And I think there's one more. or failure to collect all required repeat samples following an E. coli positive routine sample. So there are several things that could, any one of those would be fine. Okay, team 2, I guess. 3 questions left, we'll play.
Treatment for 6.
Treatment for 6. Okay, so treatment, technique. Who performs a level 2 assessment? No?
Certified engineer.
There's again one of those. That person could, but in Missouri, who specifically does perform it?
He
And
said,
what's that?
DNR.
DNR. But that's our third guess there.
Yeah,
So that's,
I know,
we
yeah.
can't count those points. But DNR does it. But you're right, a certified engineer would be qualified to do it. But in Missouri, DNR just says, we will do it. We will do it. They take it on themselves.
Some states certify other people like the engineer to do it.
Yeah, so actually for federal
Missouri has-
regulation, it's not the wrong answer, it's just, in Missouri, it's,
Yeah, that's
You
what
know.
I was thinking was the federal regulation.
there you go.
Yeah, quick save.
yeah.
I think we're gonna bump it to the third team. Which category? Treatment technique or seasonal? Only 1 point.
Seasonal, we want.
All right, seasonal. So our last question on seasonal is, how long must any system retain its level 1 and level 2 assessment reports?
Five years.
5 years.
All right.
Okay, good. And then our last is treatment technique. So, in what time frame must the system correct problems identified in either a level 1 assessment or a level 2 assessment, unless DNR permits more time? What's the usual time frame for correcting problems? No? Last one again?
Can you read it one more time?
Yep, in what time frame, let's see where it was, in what time frame must the system correct problems identified in either a level 1 assessment or a level 2 assessment, unless DNR gives you more time?
24 months.
No, within 30 days. 30 days. You got a short window of
I don't know
opportunity.
where the 30 days, I wasn't there.
I think we have one little one, didn't we?
Are we 0 or are we minus 10?
So who did win that? Who had the most points? Or the least negative points? Maybe I should have.
Hey,
It's gonna take me a minute to total this up.
Okay,
Go
okay.
ahead there, relieve everybody's
Just flag me because I don't want to forget about these. So just flag me when you get it. That's okay. That's kind of advanced math. That's why I figured we better not try to keep
I'll take
track.
your shoes off here.
Need to borrow any of my toes?
I need a bunch of negative toes.
This video will demonstrate the proper method for collecting we've got bacteriological bacteria. All public water supplies must collect and submit
I hope
at
that'll
least
be
one
loud enough.
sample each month to test for total coliform bacteria. While the process is easy, you must be careful to ensure that you don't contaminate the sample during collection. First, have clean hands and relatively clean clothes so that you don't accidentally contaminate the bottle. Can you hear it?
What is it?
Find a good spot for sampling. The most ideal tap or spigot is a cold water only tap with no access to hot water. This is because bacteria grow more abundantly in warm water environments. You want a tap that lessens the chance of having bacteria. This means that you should also avoid vertical frost-free hydrants or yard hydrants, since These have a buried drain hole which can allow bacteria to enter. Find a clean environment and avoid faucets surrounded by heavy shrubs or plant growth. If collecting your sample outside, avoid poor weather conditions such as strong winds or any precipitation. You don't want airborne bacteria to get into your sample bottle. You'll also want to locate a tap or hose bib that has no inside threads or grooves, and if possible, no outside threads. These areas are common habitats for bacteria. Before collecting your sample, flush the tap fully by opening the valve all of the way and letting the water run several minutes. 3 to 5 minutes is recommended. While flushing, test your water for free and total chlorine residuals or for a modest chloramine residual, depending upon the disinfectant used, if your supply disinfects its water. Write your results on the card. Turn off the water after several minutes and disinfect the tap. You can do this in a number of ways. The two most common methods are using a torch or a bleach spray bottle. Only use a torch if the tap and the plumbing are metal and there is no vinyl siding that can melt, like you find on many exterior structures. If using a bleach spray bottle, you may use any dilution desired. A teaspoon of bleach mixed with distilled water is sufficient, but you may use a more concentrated mixture too. The flame disinfection method uses a steadily circulating flame around the opening of the tap or hose bib. Keeping the flame in motion prevents overheating the plumbing fixture, which can melt rubber O-rings at the valve. It's a good idea to direct the flame inside the opening at the tap momentarily as well. A small puff of steam when you turn the faucet back on will ensure that you've applied enough heat. If using the bleach spray method, squirt a mist of bleach water all around the outside of the tap and again inside the tap opening too. Be careful to avoid bleaching your clothing. Although both methods are shown here for the sake of demonstration, only one of these methods for disinfecting the tap is needed to ensure a safe sample. Once the disinfection process is complete, gently open the valve on the tap and allow a small but steady stream to flow. Too heavy a flow will cause you to overfill the sample bottle, and too light a flow will cause the filling process to take so long that you might risk a contaminant getting into the bottle. Use a sealed back tea bottle which you received from the State Department of Health. Bottles include a chemical for neutralizing chlorine, so do not rinse the bottle before collecting your sample. Carefully break the sample bottle's seal, unscrew the cap, and hold it away from the flowing water facing the same direction as it was when on the bottle. Threads facing downward so that dust does not collect in the cap, which could introduce coliform bacteria to your bottle. Carefully recap the bottle. Be sure to not touch the threads on the inside of the cap or over-tighten the bottle. Touching the bottle cap threads can introduce bacteria, and over-tightening the cap might cause the lab to reject the sample, which would trigger a replacement sample requirement. Fill the sample bottle to slightly above the 100 milliliter level where you see the horizontal line. A good ballpark estimate is somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch above the 100 milliliter line. Avoid filling the bottle too full, however. Don't fill it so much that water is in the neck or threaded area of the bottle. This is the perfect time to do a visual inspection. Hold the bottle up to a light source and look at the water inside it. You should not be able to detect any particles in the water. If you can, dump out the water, get another sealed bottle, and collect a new sample. If there is anything visible in the water, it will be contaminated and not something that you'll want to send the lab for analysis. Now that you have a back tea sample that is ready to send to the lab, fill out the sample card that comes with it. Each sample bottle must have a separate card which identifies where the sample was collected and the bottle number that the card goes with, among other things. Review instructions that come with each set of bottles for completing the sample card. Notice that the time of collection for each sample must be provided in 24-hour or military time. If you collect your sample at 1:30 p.m., for instance, you'll write 13:30 on the card. This signals that you mean 1:30 in the afternoon instead of 1:30 in the morning. All back T samples must arrive at the lab within 30 hours from the time you have collected them. As soon as you collect your samples, send them to the lab. A free courier service pickup is available at county health departments. You can find the schedule of these pickups by contacting your county health department. While sample collection is not rocket science, it does require care. Be attentive to what you are doing. Don't let yourself get distracted. Handle the sample bottle with care. Properly disinfect the tap and prevent contaminants from getting into the bottle during collection. Feel free to direct questions to Missouri Rural Water Association at 573-657-5533. You'll also find us on the web at www.moruralwater.org.
What could you do to get a copy of that?
What's that?
What could you do to get a copy of that?
Get a copy of that? You can go right on our website, can't you, Jim?
YouTube.
YouTube?
Go to YouTube and search Missouri Rural Water. And it's one of the videos there.
I'd like to get Cape County Health Department to look at that.
Oh, yeah. How to take a...
Think they need to follow that procedure?
Definitely.
Now that video was a little dated. What were some of the things that are different nowadays?
The farm.
The form, right. Not that little duplicate paper, but a full sheet of paper now, right? And now you have to sign it.
The bottle has a minute and max.
The minimum and the maximum, yeah. That bottle, and it has a shrink wrap seal now instead of that little strip over it, right? So some things have changed in the recent past.
Don't we have a new video that has that on it?
The new bottle, maybe we do it.
What if you don't know
Did you?
military time?
Think so.
You updated it, did you really? This is my old copy of the old video.
I
Surely
think
everybody
it's
knows.
up there.
I need to.
I need to look and see, but I think it is.
That's good. I'm glad to know that. Update it. I'll have to get with the times and actually go to our website. I told everybody to go to our website this morning. I need to go to our website and check it out. Is it on our website too, Jim? The link? Nope, it's at YouTube. Okay.
I have something I'd like to share with you guys.
Yes.
On my first water sample on my own, this was my supervisor sitting here. I was gonna make sure everything went right, and I was doing just fine, and all of a sudden somebody said to me, "Brass will melt."
Brass will melt.
Will melt. I was heating it good.
Oh, you were really. Using a little overkill, what I call it, but
Yep.
yeah, if a little bit's good, a lot's better, right?
I wondered on our last well inspection, they used both the bleach technique and the torch.
Isn't
What
it?
was the advantage of that?
Maybe what I call overkill again. Just doing a little bit. When I torch around the air, around the hose bib a little bit just to make it uninhabitable for cold or bleach. Spray it around a little
Well,
loose.
they did the bleach and then,
Heated it.
and then heated it. They ran it.
DNR
Put
did
the
that.
bleach on, and then they heated it.
Was that
Is that
DNR?
DNR?
Yeah. Yep. Got his name, it wasn't Michael White, it was the other dude.
Jason Curtin?
The other guy, he's out of Poplar Bluff.
Sort of a big guy.
Yeah,
Big guy, sort of a young guy.
I think his name.
Hadn't been there that long.
Yeah, he's.
He's not sure himself, so he did it both.
Yeah, he did.
Well, might help. Give you a little more sense of security to do it that way, I guess. So has anybody had a level 1 assessment since the revised total coliform rule went on? Which would mean 2 or more coliform positive sample results in the same month. Anybody have that? No? So probably not a level 2 then? No problems with level 2? Okay. Good. All right, so some of those differences, I'm going to run through it now a little bit more over speedily because we covered this already. Now it's kind of like a review, right? It's like a review. So all systems, regardless of population, check at least how many repeat samples per coliform positive result. Remember how many repeats?
30.
Three. One at the original site that came back coliform positive, one downstream, and one upstream. But not necessarily within 5 service connections anymore, but somewhere in the proximity. So after you get a coliform positive result, all systems collect their usual number of routine samples during the next month. And that's different because the total coliform rule before this revision came out 2 years ago said if you collect fewer than 5 samples and you get a coliform positive result, then next month you have to collect 5 samples. So you don't have to do that anymore. If I collect 3, I get a coliform positive result. Next month I collect 3 routines again. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me because I've got a small system. Repeat samples no longer need to be within 5 service connections upstream and downstream, simply somewhere in the vicinity, but upstream and downstream, just not within 5 service connections. So, you know that example question I gave, 10 service connections downstream. No problem with that with the revised total coliform rule. What treatment technique is triggered when the following occurs? 2 or more coliform positive results in the same month. Remember that? That's the level 1 assessment. Level 1 assessment. And who may perform that?
Operator.
The operator right there at the water system, or the owner of the system, or some representative at the local system. What public notification does this require? 2 or more coliform positive results now require no public notification. Unlike the old days, you don't have to. Confirmed E. coli, I call it confirmed E. coli, that's the way you know it's confirmed. E. coli MCL violation. And that is what level assessment? Level 2. And who does that one in Missouri?
Yeah.
DNR, good.
Right.
What tier level violation does it cause? Tier 1, all right, good. Now, this is a point of potential confusion. This is one thing I don't like the way they did this. The smaller the number on the tiers, the bigger the threat, the more immediate the threat. Tier 1, immediate health risk, get the word out within 24 hours, public broadcast. But on the level 1 and level 2 assessments, the level 2 assessment represents the bigger health risk, the E. coli MCL violation. And that really could confuse the daylights out of you. So I wish they would not have done that. I wish they would have stuck with the smaller number means the more severe. So what treatment technique? So that's a level 2 DNR, and that one is level 1, or tier 1 violation. So we have that new back-teed model sheet with all the information you put on there, and one difference is, besides it being a full sheet, is that you actually sign it. In the old form, you didn't have to sign now. Sampling site plan, some things that are the same as the old rule. Your sampling site plan, you still have one that shows representative sample sites. What happens if you add or change a sample site? Is that okay? To add or change? If you notify DNR, typically what you want to do is, if you add sites, you want to send them, or you change sites, you want to send them a list. But now be aware, the state, the health department never retires an old back T sample location. So if you say, boy, we've taken a sample at this location for many years, but now it's been an abandoned building and nobody lives there anymore, I don't want to take samples there anymore because I'm afraid the plumbing, is just sitting there, the water in the lines, and it might give me a false positive, so I'm going to not do that anymore. That was sample site number 5. I can't say, well, I'm going to change that to this place over here where we have active residents living there and call that sample ID number 5. That 5 stays forever with that, even if you retire that sample site, okay? Just don't assign that same number to some new location, different location. So that otherwise causes problems for the state. If you ever got in the back your results from your coliform test, and it says total coliform rule on one of your locations, that means this site doesn't have a proper identification in the state lab's database. They don't recognize that site. Maybe you're calling it one thing, your predecessor called it something else. It doesn't quite match what they've got, so they just call it total coliform TCR rule. If you see that, you might want to look in your paperwork and find out what is the official ID number for that site and use that in the future so they will identify it. Where do you never collect a routine sample?
Well,
At the well, right. You never collect one at your well or at your source. Routine samples are supposed to be representative of the distribution system, not of your source water, right? So good, at the well. There's one other place you would never take a routine sample, and that would be at the dead end of a line. Because for one thing, if it comes back coliform positive, I don't have a downstream site to take a repeat.
Yeah.
And I say, my new language today is at least 3 repeats. You got one at the original sample site that came back coliform positive, 1 downstream, 1 upstream. So why am I saying at least 3? That's only 3. Why do I say at least 3? Because the groundwater rule. What does the groundwater rule say? We haven't gotten to that one either yet.
We gotta take one at the source.
One at your source too. So you might end up taking more than 3. And that might be because of sources that are active. Could that be? Do you have 2 wells?
no, I operate 2, but no, when I had that bad test, they made me take 5. One at the source and 4 other places.
Okay. Well, there's another one of the rules that changed. When you collect only one, normally only one routine sample.
Month.
In the old rule, if you collected only 1 routine, when you had a repeat that come back bad, you had to collect 4 repeats in your system, plus now 1 at the well.
Yeah.
So now I get where your 5 comes from.
Yeah.
That's from the old rule that said you had to have 4 repeats if you only collect 1 routine. That too changed. That's one of those things I don't think I even had on the slide. I could put on there.
If your system doesn't have a loop, wouldn't you have the potential for everything to be dead end?
Yeah, everything could potentially be a dead end at your far ends. But I mean, before you got to the end of the line, you'd have upstream, downstream connections. But you're right, everything eventually would dead end if you're not looped. Good point. Sampling site plan revisions. So if you were making your sample site plan changes, your sample location ID, there's some kind of number you designate. It might be 001, 002, or something like that. Routine sample collection point address or description, and then your repeat upstream and your repeat downstream location in that. And you can always retire sites. You know, if you've got a site that's just problematic, questionable quality, and you're afraid it's going to cause bad samples, or it has in the past, that might be a good site to retire. You want, and it's not cheating the test, it's simply saying, I want water from my water main. The truest test is a test from my water main, not from plumbing causing problems because it's a house that's not used or whatever. So, then a system map is good to have, and the map could be a hand-drawn map, or it could be a city map or a county map. You might create it on a computer as an Excel spreadsheet and put points around to generally represent your system layout, and it can be pretty crude, but just to show kind of as an aerial image how your sites are kind of spread out among the system. It could be hand-drawn, it could be a Google Earth thing. Repeat samples are collected within 24 hours of being notified, and continue your source water sampling as part of your repeat samples for the groundwater, which we're going to get to one more module after this, and that's the groundwater rule, and we'll get to that one after we take a break. We'll have a break before that segment though. Level 1 treatment technique triggers. If a system collects fewer than 40 samples per month, like all of us in here would, it has 2 or more coliform positive samples in a month, then it is triggered to have a level 1 assessment. Or the system simply fails to collect all of its required repeat samples after a coliform positive routine sample result. And remember that time frame for the level 1 assessment?
30 days.
30 days, good, 30 days. So the operator can do it, complete the form within 30 days. DNR actually even has a checkoff list that you do, so it kind of makes it easy, streamlines it a little bit. May be conducted by water system. When must corrective actions be completed? That's the same 30 days, the same 30-day time frame. So you not only complete this form and get it to DNR, but you complete any corrective measures unless they're bigger issues, and DNR has to give you time for it. If you're going to need an engineer and maybe need to go get financing because it's a big project, that's going to take a lot more than 30 days. So DNR will allow for that. And then things you're looking at on the level 1 assessment. Source water, if you have a treatment plant, your distribution system, maintenance issues, your storage tanks, location of your samples, and the tap operational changes. Any of those kinds of things that could influence your results. The level 1 assessment has some basic information about the system, and then it's got a lot of questions. And just to pick a few questions out of here. Have any of the following occurred? Any reported loss of pressure? Visible indication of unsanitary conditions? Any sites with low or inadequate disinfectant residual? You know, any of those things and a lot more could be why you had a coliform positive result. So the gist of the revised total coliform rule, what I say about the old rule, the coliform rule, was if we had coliform positive samples this month, then what the remedy was, we cross our fingers and hope next month we don't have bad samples. Maybe DNR would have given you guidance that said, well, why don't you flush your system? Or why don't you make sure you got a good residual out there and flush until you get one if you're chlorinating and you just lost your residual. They might give you a little guidance, but there was really no remedy. There was no even requirement to have a remedy. So what EPA did is kind of backtracked and said, instead of scaring customers and giving no remedy, let's stop notifying customers about 2 or more coliform results in a month. Let's not call it a violation anymore.
Hey there, somebody
But let's instead address the problem. Let's see if we can figure out why did we have a coliform result. And maybe we can narrow it down and then make sure it doesn't happen anymore. So that's what the gist of this is. All this checklist from DNR is meant to simply help you think of every possible thing that might be wrong, that might have gone wrong. Did we flush the tap? Did we remove an aerator? Did we use a swivel kind of a faucet? Do we have a cross connection to our distribution system? Do we have a water main break? So those are just lots of different things. Questions about storage tanks or screens in place. Do we have proper ventilation? What's the condition of the tank? Maybe the tank hasn't been cleaned out for 10 years. You know, way overdue, and it's maybe got coliform in it. Cross connections, security issues, pump to waste in our source water, treatment processes that maybe have been interrupted, heavy rainfall that might have influenced our result, additional comments. I think we're not going to do this because we spent so much time on this already, but let's just see if we can troubleshoot it without going into groups. I'm going to present this issue. The wholesale system uses chloramines to disinfect its water. Nobody in here uses chloramines, right? Only free chlorine. Anybody not use anything? Any chlorine? You guys don't use any. You don't either. Okay. This system uses chloramine, so that's chlorine and ammonia that bond together to form a disinfectant. Our consecutive system has had 2 coliform positive sample results this month. When they conducted their level 1 assessment, we found very little residual in one section of the system. We flushed but could not get the residual to rise. We had a hard time keeping a residual in this section. Any ideas of what could be going on in this system?
It's being used continuously.
Say that again.
It's being used continuously. There's not a set time where it's not being used. Not 6 hours before it's not being used, where it has residual.
Okay, maybe so. Maybe there's a big demand somewhere in that line too.
Leak somewhere.
Could be a leak. Could be a low pressure where a contaminant got in. Could be biofilm. With chloramines and trouble holding a residual, one of the threats usually that you have is nitrification. That the ammonia breaks free from the chlorine, and we have free ammonia available, and it breaks down to nitrite and nitrate. It starts causing difficulty keeping a residual. So that's a possibility too. Any number of things that could be wrong there. Level 2 treatment technique triggers an E. coli MCO violation, and that would result from an E. coli positive result in a routine sample plus 1 or more E. coli results in a repeat sample. Or a coliform positive result in a routine sample and an E. coli positive result in a repeat sample. Or an E. coli sample in an original result, routine, and a coliform positive in a repeat. So it doesn't take E. coli and E. coli necessarily. E. coli in one routine or repeat with at least a coliform positive in the other routine or repeat. There's always got to be something bad in both. And one of those bad things got to be E. coli at least, for it to be E. coli MCO violation. Or that last one, the system simply fails to collect all required repeat samples after any E. coli routine sample. So they automatically default that failure to an E. coli MCO violation. Also, if you have any 2 or more level 1 assessments in a 12-month rolling period unless DNR was able to be satisfied that it was strictly a distribution-related kind of a thing, and you've got it kind of corrected. They might waive that as a level 2 requirement. Otherwise, what level 2 assessment time frame is the same as the level 1, 30 days. DNR comes in and does it themselves. And I think that's DNR's way of trying to lessen the financial burden on systems to have to hire that certified engineer to come in and do it for you. Then corrective actions for a level 2, just like a level 1, the report, everything has to be done within that 30 days, that same 30 days, unless the issue requires more time, and then DNR will assess that on a case-by-case basis. Same details are being examined in your system, only now with this outside perspective from somebody from DNR. And I always think that an outside perspective is really helpful, because sometimes you're doing something so much, or you see a condition you've seen so much that you're so used to that you don't recognize that it maybe represents a threat or it could be a cause of the problem in your system. And somebody from the outside says, well, what about that then? Oh, I never even thought about it. It's always been like that. Well, that's why sometimes it's helpful just to have somebody from the outside come in and look. Tier 1 violation, so an E. coli MCL violation is either confirmed E. coli or system fails to collect all required repeat samples following a routine E. coli sample result. Of course, Tier 1 public notification, you must notify public for Tier 1. How quickly? That one's 24 hours.
Yeah.
And use what method to get the word out? That's that broadcast media. Usually a television station, most viewed by your customers, and a couple of radio stations most listened to. Revised Total Coliform Rule Tier 2 violations are treatment technique violations. So system fails. So the level 1 and level 2 assessments are called treatment technique. System fails to conduct a level 1 or level 2 assessment. That's a violation of the treatment technique. You're supposed to do it. That's the treatment technique. Our system fails to correct any sanitary defect if DNR detects something during an inspection. That would be still a Tier 2 violation. Must notify the public for Tier 2s. How soon is it again?
30 days.
30 days, good. And there we use direct delivery. Typically, direct delivery is the bill, water bill, or a letter, a newsletter, or something like that. You can send it. And it might be door to door in a small system. Might be public posting if DNR allows it in a small system. Tier 3 violations for monitoring. If a system fails to collect any required routine sample, strictly a monitoring violation. Nobody's at risk of getting sick just because you failed to go get your back T sample, right? But it's still a violation of the Federal Drinking Water Act, which is that you got to sample monthly. System fails to test for E. coli following a coliform positive routine sample. Well, here in Missouri, you're going to take your repeat, send them to the lab, and they're going to automatically test for E. coli, so it's not like you failed to test. In other states, systems are more independent and they simply go hire that done at a lab in that. So, reporting violation, a system fails to submit correctly completed assessment report following either a level 1 or level 2 assessment. So a level 2 assessment DNR would be doing, but a level 1 assessment for us in Missouri you would be doing, and you fail to submit it and it's not completed correctly, that'd be a reporting violation. We already talked about the Tier 3, that's consumer confidence report. And that date again is
July 1st.
July 1st. Good. Deadline for doing that. Seasonal systems have state-specified startup procedures to lessen the likelihood of contaminant events, and we said that already in that game. This is all review, really. Flushing, taking a back T sample, maybe disinfecting. And that would be determined by DNR what they recommend for a given system in that, whatever. If they fail to conduct startup procedures that DNR tells them to do, what's the consequence there? What level, tier level violation is that? That is a level 2, tier level 2 violation. That's a what they call treatment technique violation. If they fail to submit written certification to the state showing completion of their startup procedures, well, that's a reporting violation, so that's a tier 3 reporting violation. Record keeping requirements for a revised total coliform rule, really for everything. Your bacteriological analysis, your level 1, level 2 assessments if you have any corrective actions from a level 1 or level 2 assessment. They're all the same time frame, and that is 5 years for that. So level 1 assessment conducted by system personnel required within 30 days of the time you're notified of the issue of having 2 or more coliform positive samples in the same month, or you simply fail to collect all your required repeat samples following a coliform positive result. Level 2 assessment required within 30 days. That's performed by DNR. By any 2 unresolved level 1 assessment issues in 12-month time frame, or E. coli MCL violation, or by failing to collect all required repeat samples following an E. coli routine sample result that's positive. And the violations again include Tier 1 public notification requirements for an E. coli MCL violation, 24-hour time frame for reporting. Tier 2 treatment technique violation, failure to conduct the level 1 assessment, or make corrective actions within the 30-day time frame. 30-day time frame to report that to your customers, and a Tier 3 public notification, monitoring or reporting violation, failure to submit a fully completed level 1 assessment to DNR within the 30-day time frame. And that's on your CCR report. Record keeping for everything is 5 years. So a lot of stuff in there that's changed from the old rule. Some of it's gotten easier. Other things they've added a little more to what you got to do. Any questions about any of it? I tried to breeze through that set of, because we took quite a bit of time with the quiz. All right, why don't we call it break time, shall we? 2:45. Want to take 10 minutes, get some fresh air? I guess, are we about ready? Yes. Good. I'm glad folks are still eating on those donuts. We need to finish them off, they say. Class isn't done until the donuts are. Okay, so this is our last segment. Today we'll tackle groundwater rule, and I know some little elements of that leaked into the revised total coliform rule when we were doing that. Oh, and Jim informed me on the break that Team 2 had won the game, the most points. So Team 2, you get a quality on tap cup for each of you. Yeah. So do while supplies last. You got supplies enough. Able to get a few from the office. I don't know that they reorder those cups anymore, so I'm not sure if we even ever give those away anymore. Those are kind of remnants from the last shipment they had.
Just something you had left over.
Well, when you put it that way, it doesn't sound all that enticing, does it? Trying to get rid of all of our old inventory, right? All right, so the groundwater rule, who's affected by the rule? Well, groundwater systems, community water supplies and non-community water supplies alike, and groundwater and surface water when they're blended systems, but there's no treatment for the groundwater. In other words, the treatments of the surface water, groundwater isn't piped into that plant, but just is in the lines, in the towers, added as a supplement to the water supply for capacity purposes, but is not treated. So then it would be subject to the rule. Requirements of the groundwater rule: sanitary surveys. This groundwater rule, I should say, is when EPA started really moving groundwater systems toward merging with surface water systems in terms of some of the requirements. And one of those is sanitary surveys. The surface water and groundwater under the influence of surface water always had these requirements about sanitary surveys, having DNR come in and do what I call a white glove inspection of hundreds of different things. Checking your records and your storage tanks and your flush outs and your treatment processes and your well houses and all kinds of stuff. So really giving a thorough inspection of everything. Identification of higher risk systems, that's part of what comes with the sanitary surveys in part. It can also be a result of your total coliform samples. If you've had a history of some bad samples along the way, especially if there were E. coli issues in the past, then that would be a system that's more likely a contaminant risk system. Source water monitoring at targeted groundwater systems, and that would be systems that don't provide for-log inactivation of viruses. And inactivation would involve either disinfection, removal, like membrane filtration, or a combination of both of those. So, groundwater rule, now that's been around for a few years, so we're probably pretty used to and comfortable with that. Sanitary surveys. Who's had a sanitary survey recently on a groundwater system?
Talking about DNR.
Yeah, DNR coming in and doing an inspection. Did they give you, send you a letter with, here are the things we're going to be asking for, to kind of give you a heads up? So did they send you a letter in advance telling you, here are the things we're going to be
They
asking?
didn't actually send a letter, they called.
They did call?
And said they would be coming up to do one, and wanted to set up a day and a time. Then he emailed me a list of what they wanted to see when they got there.
Okay,
So it's
good.
not actually a formal letter.
Okay, just a list, that's good though, an email version. And that include probably records that they would want to look at and things like that. Okay, good. And did that take all day, or did that take half a day? Couple hours, all right. So sanitary surveys, that inspection, and source. What about source sampling? Has anybody had a coliform positive result at a source water sample? Who's had to take, in the last year or so, who's had to take a source water sample? You had a coliform positive result? Anybody? Nobody? Okay, well, good. Sanitary survey. So all groundwater systems receive regular inspection, and what they inspect for are the source, the treatment, if you have the treatment, your distribution system, your finished water storage, your pumps, your pumping facilities, controls, your monitoring, reporting, and data verification, your system management and operation, and operator compliance with state requirements. Some of the same things listed in the revised total coliform rule when you're doing a level 1 or level 2 assessment, but some more extensive things as well. So those are the items. Sanitary surveys, every 3 years for community water systems, and every 5 years for a community system with protected barriers, or also for non-community water systems. So, Scott, your system will probably do every 5 years for the inspection. State,
They'll do it more often than 3 years too.
is that right? Do they do it more often? Well, they're usually saying they're short-staffed. I'm surprised they're doing it more
I've
frequently.
been there 4 years, and this is the third one I've seen there.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so they're more vigilant than the requirement even for it. They'll list significant deficiencies, and they're supposed to send you a report within 30 days if they of their inspection, and especially highlight what's significant. So significant deficiency would be something DNR would cite as a potential contaminant threat to your water source in this case. If you had cracks or breaks in your grout around your casing, for instance, or in your sanitary seal on top of your casing, those would be potential threats that pull in dirt, contaminants, coliform into your water source. Source water monitoring, triggered source water monitoring, you would have to do. The exemptions to that requirement is if you provide 4-log inactivation viruses. That means you have, typically in Missouri, disinfection at your water sources, your wells, and you have a storage tank right outside the well, and you have sufficient contact time before your first customer. That would be when you would not then have to be triggered to take source water samples if you get a coliform positive result. But if you don't have to do that, then you have to do something else. You have to report to the state every month that you've maintained your 4-log inactivation of viruses. So what would trigger your source water monitoring? What causes you to have to go to your well and take a sample? If you get a coliform positive sample result, then they want you to go to the well. How soon do you have to plug that thing? What's that? 24 hours. Same as your repeat samples, within 24 hours. Good. And it's, now there are some exceptions in the state, but usually it's considered to be at every source, every groundwater source that was running operational the day you collected your bacteriological samples. So if you collected samples on Tuesday and you find out that, or let's say yesterday, Monday, and you find out today you had a coliform positive result, the same wells that were running yesterday are the ones you collect your source water samples from. So that was part of the reason why in the revised total coliform rule I say at least 3 repeat samples. Let's say you have 2 wells running the day you take your samples. You've got to take, you get a coliform positive result, take one at that site, take one downstream, take one upstream, maybe one, if you're a small system, serving 1,000 people or fewer, maybe one of those is at one of your wells. If there was another well running, you'd still have to take another source water sample. So you might end up taking more than 3. And you do that within your 24-hour period. And then source water samples, are upstream from any chemical injection. So they're true source waters or raw water untreated source samples from your well. So that dual compliance for those small systems that serve 1,000 or fewer people, they're the ones that only collect one back T sample a month typically. They may go upstream and get their repeat sample at their well. So I've kind of already covered this, so let me just say it, at their well. And again, upstream from any chemical injection. If the source water sample is invalidated by the state, groundwater system has to collect a replacement sample, just like any of your normal bacteriological samples, within 24 hours from the same source where the sample was invalidated. Violation actions: if the source water sample is E. coli positive, what violation would that be? Tier 1 level violation. Good. Tier 1 level violation. So how again, we're going to review this again. How would you get that word out to your customer? Okay.
TV.
Good. Broadcast media, TV, radio. State may, and within 24 hours, state may require immediate corrective action, or the groundwater system must do what? What usually would occur, short of immediate action, would be that you'd go back to that same well that had an E. coli positive result, or wells, more than one. And in this case, it's going to be DNR doing this. You would collect 5 follow-up samples within 24 hours. And they too would be tested for E. coli positive. If they're E. coli positive, excuse me, they'd be tested for E. coli. And that would give some sense of verification that that first E. coli positive result was actually valid. If you got follow-up samples that are also E. coli positive, 1 or more. So that's what you do. Take those additional 5 samples, and those too are source water samples upstream of any chemical injection. If any of those 5 additional source water samples is E. coli positive, what violation is that? What's that?
Level 1.
And that would have been my guess. But that really isn't the case. Now, we already have the level 1 in place. So think of it this way. They're looking at it as a sequence of events. We already have the level 1 because of the E. coli. Now, we've got 1 or more of these follow-up 5 samples being E. coli. Now it's a level 2, or tier 2, excuse me, groundwater rule violation. Groundwater rule violation. So level 2, how do we communicate that to our public?
A letter.
Okay. Direct delivery. Direct delivery. So a letter or newsletter or on the water bill. I used to think way back that it was, well, a newspaper, but not newspaper, because I'd have to buy the newspaper. And I shouldn't have to buy the news about the water I drink. It should come to me. So that's why you could do that in addition if you wanted to, but it's not the way to satisfy direct delivery. And that time frame for level 2 is what again? 30 days. Treatment technique violation or treatment technique requirements. If a significant deficiency is identified, that's through that inspection DNR would do at your system, or one or more of those 5 sourced water follow-up samples is E. coli positive, then the groundwater system, we confer with DNR. What would that time frame be? How, within what time would you expect them to think you should contact them?
60 days.
What's that?
60 days.
No, half of that, it's 30 days.
Okay,
30 days, not bad yet. And take corrective action. So we gotta take corrective action at this point now with E. coli positive result from our well. We'd go back within 24 hours and take another 5 samples, and one or more of those is E. coli positive. Now we gotta do something, corrective action. So we take one of 4 steps. What would be those steps, or what would be one of them? What might you do to correct the problem, E. coli? All right, let me go ahead and go through the list. We're going to do this within 120-day time frame. So this is a 120-day time frame for this. Now the state can extend that if it takes a lot.
Level 1 assessment?
No, that's the revised total coliform rule. So for this, what we have to do is we have to either provide an alternate source of water. It might be this is a small enough well, we could maybe valve it shut, keep it shut, plug it off. Eliminate the source of contamination. That could be we shock our well. That might be a lasting permanent fix, and it might only be a temporary thing, and maybe the contamination will come back again after that chlorine burns out. Provide 4-log treatment of viruses, and that's typically through chemical disinfection. So that is a permanent fix if we're going to continually disinfect the water as we pump it from the well into our system. Of course, then we have to have sufficient contact time before the first customer to make sure that that's a true safeguard for our water. Consecutive system that has no source of its own. Consecutive system with coliform positive sample within 24 hours must notify its wholesaler, the system that's supplying it water, and that system has to collect a source water sample for E. coli within that 24-hour period, and then notify its consecutive system of E. coli positive results if it gets any. If a consecutive system has coliform positive sample and the consecutive system also has its own source water, because remember, a consecutive system buys some or all of its water, so it might have its own source but supplement its water with a supplier. The consecutive system then also collects a source water sample within 24 hours for E. coli testing. Whichever system, the wholesaler or the consecutive system that has E. coli positive result, if any, has it, that system's the one that has to go to that well or wells that have that problem and collect 5 repeat samples from that source. Groundwater systems must inform the public of any uncorrected significant deficiencies or E. coli contamination in its groundwater source. Failure to act. What's the consequence, do you think, of failing to act within 120 days or based on a state-approved schedule that extends that time frame? You need more time. If you fail to take the action, what do you think that's called? This term we've heard in relation to the revised total coliform rule with the level 1 and level 2 assessments, treatment technique violation, and also with the total organic carbon percent removals. Treatment technique violation. And a treatment technique violation falls under what tier level? No, at 2. Tier 2 violation, so 30-day time frame. All groundwater systems providing 4-log treatment of viruses have to do chemical disinfection, membrane filtration, or state-approved alternative technology for 4-log inactivation, and then conduct compliance monitoring. Compliance monitoring simply says anything you do as a corrective measure, you've got to then verify that that corrective measure is in place, consistently applied, hasn't failed at some point along the way. So then you, on a monthly basis, submit to DNR verification of that process. Groundwater systems that disinfect, monitor their disinfection, monitor UV if they use UV, and systems that serve 3,300 people or fewer monitor their chemical disinfection once daily during peak hours. To ensure 4-log inactivation, a system that serves more than 3,300, our magic number 3,300, we see it in several regulations, must monitor disinfectant residuals how frequently?
All the time.
All the time, right, continuously monitor. And what residual has to be recorded daily?
Lowest free chlorine.
Good, lowest chlorine residual, lowest free chlorine residual. And then if you've got problems with your continuous monitoring equipment, you must grab a sample if the equipment fails, and grab sample every 4 hours. And you have how long to repair the equipment? Anybody know that? You have 14 days to repair the equipment. And that's a monitoring requirement. So for a system serving more than 3,300 people, if they don't get this done in 14 days, repairing that, they're not monitoring continuously like they're required to. So that's would be a monitoring violation. So. Disinfection drop-off. If your disinfectant falls below your required level, what's the minimum disinfectant level entering your free chlorine entering your distribution system? Do you remember?
2 parts.
Minimum level is 0.5. 0.05.
Okay, 0.5, 0.5 free chlorine entering, and for chloramines, you remember?
2.
No, it's a double the 0.5, so 1, half of that. So 1 of chloramine entering the system, so that's the minimum normally. How soon must the system return to an acceptable residual? So if you fall below those levels, how long of a grace period do you have? Anybody know? You got a 4-hour grace period. So if you fall below 0.5 free or 1.0 total chlorines, and are there more than 4 hours, then you're supposed to report that to DNR. If not, what do you have to do? Well, you just have to report it to DNR, as I mentioned, but you should try to correct the problem. Groundwater Rule Tier 1 violation. Hopefully you never see DNR looking shocked like that at your system. If you have E. coli positive sample result resulting from triggered source water monitoring, that's a Groundwater Rule Tier 1 violation. So that, remember, we have a coliform positive result, we go to our wells that were active that day, we sample source water, and one or more of those wells' water results in E. coli positive sample, then we have a groundwater rule tier 1 violation. A groundwater rule tier 2 violation, an E. coli positive sample in any of our 5 follow-up source water samples. Groundwater system fails to take corrective action. That could be something DNR mandated you to do, and you failed to do it following the E. coli sample, or a written report from their inspection that says you have one or more significant deficiencies after there, and you fail to take corrective action, that would be a tier 2 violation also. System fails to comply with state-approved plan and schedule, including interim measures. They might give you something to do temporarily until you get a permanent fix in place. One of those problems could be you choose to say, we're going to just go ahead and disinfect permanently. That's one of our solutions that's allowed, one of those 4 options. And we're going to do that instead of being triggered anymore with these source water sample requirements. So you elect to provide treatment in lieu of triggered source water sample, but then you fail to maintain or log treatment or inactivation of viruses for more than 4 hours. Groundwater rule tier 3 violation. Failure to conduct triggered source water monitoring. Failure to conduct assessment source water monitoring. That would be on an individual basis if the state required it. I think back in the early days of this rule, the state required it on some systems. So just failure to conduct your triggered source water monitoring. Doesn't mean anybody's going to get sick because you failed to take a sample. But you did fail to do what the groundwater rule mandates you do, so it is a monitoring violation. Failure to conduct compliance monitoring. So you do say disinfect, inactivate your chlorine or inactivate viruses, but you're not monitoring to make sure you're maintaining proper disinfectant. Community water systems have some special notification. Groundwater system has significant deficiencies that have not been corrected, or E. coli positive result, has to repeat its notice every year until your problem is corrected, and provide the notice within the consumer confidence report unless it's corrected before the next issue comes out. Special public notification for community water systems, the name of the significant deficiency or the fecal contaminant and the date you learned of the problem. If the fecal contaminant has been addressed, and if so, the date, and what the plan is for corrective measures, and what the schedule is, by what date will it be corrected, or what are the temporary measures, interim measures the state has mandated that you do, and your required E. coli positive language, which would be from Chapter 8 of the Drinking Water Regulations. If the groundwater system has uncorrected significant deficiency, for non-community water systems, system must repeat notice annually and provide a notice in the manner approved by the state. If corrected within 12 months, it's not required unless DNR stipulates. So that's usually for a non-community system, that's usually public posting, I'd say. Public notification for non-community water system must include the nature of the significant deficiency, again, and the date, state-approved plan and schedule, and any interim measures. So same as for a community system there. Groundwater system reports to the state corrective action from either an E. coli positive source water sample or a significant deficiency. State can offer exemption from triggered source water monitoring. That would probably be in an instance in which it was determined to the state's satisfaction that the contaminant truly was a distribution issue, not a source water issue. Record keeping requirements. So 3 years for public notifications, 5 years if an E. coli positive result were invalidated. Notice to the wholesaler by a consecutive system of a total coliform positive result. Lowest daily disinfectant residual. Your date and duration when your residual fell below the required amount for more than 4 hours. You're going to keep that record too for 5 years. State specified requirements for membrane filters for systems. Rare that have it, but some systems do. 10 years, documented corrective actions. And that's the same as sanitary surveys, 10 years. State specified minimum disinfectant residual. Now, I've already said 0.5 parts per million minimum entering your distribution system. But let's say I don't have a lot of detention time or hold time in my storage tank before the water goes in it and out to the first customer. DNR can say, to compensate for too little time, boost your chlorine to make up the difference. So they might stipulate for this system, you have to have a 1.2 minimum chlorine residue entering your system because you don't necessarily have enough time, hold time. So they do have a list of systems with their minimum requirements above 0.5 to compensate for not having a sufficient amount of time. And then sanitary surveys and any actions taken, 10 years. Construction permit regulation chapter and quick reference guides. If anybody wants them and you want to give me your email, I can mail those to you. Typically, one thing I have found easy to digest regulation, now that I've gone through all these long details about regulations, is EPA produces what's called Quick Reference Guide, Quick Reference Guide, QRGs in short, and they'll do a quick reference guide for every regulation, and sometimes it's just 2 pages, front and back maybe, and it's got different tables or boxes, and they'll have time frames, population size, water source types, and they will give you the lowdown on the regulation, what all is required, by which systems, population or source, type of source water you have, in a quick layout. Sometimes it's 4 pages when it's more detailed. But anyway, if anybody's interested, you are welcome to give me your email if you want any of that stuff, and I can send that to you. And that might be easy to digest if you ever have to wade through any of those regulations. I know you're mostly not affected by some of those that we talked about today. Any questions about anything? If you're ever wanting just to have the state drinking water regulations at easy disposal, you can go to the Secretary of State's website. So sos.mo.gov, SOS. And I think it's toward the right side of the page on one of the tabs. It says State Regulations or something like that. Click on it and you'll scroll down till you see Division 60, and it'll say Safe Drinking Water Commission, and they'll have 16 chapters. That's the 16 chapters of the drinking water regulations. So that's how you get to it. So I think we're going to call it a day.
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right.
Motion adjourned.
Make a motion, we adjourn. Do I have any seconds? Okay. I say good. Let's